My grandmother, Evelyn Vance, lived in northern Wisconsin in a small town called Eagle River. Every winter break when I was growing up, my parents would drive me up there to stay with her for a week. She had a small farmhouse on the edge of town, surrounded by frozen fields and woods. I loved those visits. She would make hot chocolate and tell me stories about when she was young, and I would spend hours exploring the property, building snowmen, and throwing snowballs at fence posts. But there was one rule she always gave me, and she was serious about it in a way that made me uncomfortable, even as a kid. Never go near the tree in the backfield. I asked her why once. I must have been 8 or 9. She just looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read and said, "That tree isn't for playing. You stay away from it." I didn't understand what she meant, but I listened. The tree was impossible to miss. It stood alone in the middle of the backfield, maybe 200 yards from the house. A massive oak, leafless and dark against the white snow. It looked dead or close to it, with twisted branches that reached up like claws every winter. I'd look at it from my bedroom window and wonder what was so special about it that I couldn't go near it. The rule stuck with me through the years, even as a teenager when I thought I was too old for my grandmother's superstitions. I never went close to that tree. Something about it felt wrong. Not in an obvious scary way, just wrong, like it didn't belong there. Or maybe like it belonged there too much. I moved away for college, then got a job in Minneapolis, and the visits to my grandmother's house became less frequent. She passed away when I was 32. Cancer, it was quick. I inherited the house, and since I was going through a rough patch financially, I decided to move back and fix the place up. It was mid-January when I arrived, and the town was buried under 2 feet of snow. The house looked smaller than I remembered, sadder somehow. I spent the first few days cleaning, going through my grandmother's things and trying not to feel too lonely. One afternoon, I was up in the attic looking for old photo albums when I found a wooden box tucked behind some Christmas decorations. Inside was a stack of letters, a few black and white photographs, and a journal in my grandmother's handwriting. I took it downstairs and started reading. Most of it was mundane: grocery lists, reminders, thoughts about the weather. But then I found an entry from 1969. It was dated February 14th. The entry was short. "They finally stopped coming around asking about Julian. Sheriff says the case is closed. Nobody knows what we did. Nobody but Arthur and me. The ground was too frozen for the cemetery, so we made our own choice. God forgive us." I read it 3 times trying to make sense of it. Julian. I didn't recognize the name. Arthur was my grandfather. He had died before I was born. I kept reading through the journal, looking for more references. I found another entry from March of that same year. "The tree is growing again. I didn't think it would after what happened beneath it. Arthur says I'm being foolish, but I can't shake the feeling that Julian is still down there. Still angry." My hands were shaking. I set the journal down and walked to the back window. The tree was there, dark and skeletal against the white field. I grabbed my coat and boots and went outside. The cold was brutal, the kind that makes your lungs burn. I trudged through the snow toward the tree, each step sinking deep. It took me almost 10 minutes to reach it. Up close, the tree was even bigger than I remembered. The trunk was massive, easily 6 feet across, and the bark was rough and scarred. I walked around it slowly, looking for something, anything, that would explain what my grandmother had written. That's when I saw it. On the far side of the trunk, low to the ground, someone had carved initials, JT 1969. The letters were old, barely visible, almost swallowed by the bark. I knelt down in the snow and brushed away the powder at the base of the tree. The ground was uneven, slightly raised in a way that didn't look natural. I went back to the house and grabbed a shovel. I'm not sure what I was thinking. Maybe I needed to know. Maybe I just couldn't let it go. I started digging. The ground was frozen solid, and it took me over an hour to break through the first few inches. But once I got past the frost line, the soil came up easier. I dug for another hour, maybe more, until my arms ached and my breath came out in ragged clouds. Then the shovel hit something that wasn't earth and wasn't a rock. It was something that felt wrong to touch. I stopped digging with the shovel and used my hands, clearing the frozen dirt away slowly. What I found made me pull back immediately. Old fabric, rotted and stained. Something that had been buried for a very long time. Something that shouldn't have been there. I didn't dig any further. I sat there in the snow staring at what I'd uncovered, understanding finally what my grandmother had done and what she'd lived with for 50 years. I filled the hole back in as best I could, my hands shaking the entire time, and went inside. I spent the rest of that night going through the rest of my grandmother's things looking for answers. I found more letters tucked away in a different box. They were from my grandmother's sister, dated 1968 and 1969. She mentioned Julian in several of them. Apparently he was a hired hand who worked on the farm. The letters didn't say much, but they hinted at something darker, a fight, an accident, something my grandparents had covered up. Finally, in the bottom of an old trunk, I found a newspaper clipping from February 1969. It was from the local paper, just a small article. Local man missing. It mentioned Julian Thorne, 32, last seen at the Vance farm on February 12th. The article said he'd been reported missing by a friend who said Julian never showed up for a planned trip to Duluth. Police investigated but found no evidence of foul play. The case went cold. I sat on my grandmother's bed holding that clipping and pieced it together. Julian Thorne had worked on the farm. Something happened. A fight, an accident, maybe something worse. And instead of reporting it, my grandparents buried him in the back field under that oak tree. The ground was frozen, too hard to dig the way they should have, so they did what they could with what the winter would allow. That's why the grave was so close to the surface. That's why the tree looked wrong. It wasn't just a tree, it was a marker, a secret kept for decades. I never found out exactly what happened. The journal entries stopped after March 1969. My grandmother never wrote about it again, but I thought about it constantly. I thought about her living in that house for 50 more years, looking out at that tree every single day, watching it grow, watching it twist and darken, living with the knowledge of what was underneath it. I sold the house 3 months later and moved back to Minneapolis. I didn't tell anyone what I found. I thought about going to the police. But what would I say? That I dug up something on my own property based on a journal entry from 50 years ago. They would ask questions I didn't want to answer, and part of me didn't want to disturb it further. Whoever Julian was, whatever happened to him, he'd been under that tree for over 5 decades. My grandmother had lived with that secret her entire life. But here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. When I was a kid, she told me to stay away from that tree. She made it a rule, a hard rule, the kind you don't break. And now I understand why. It wasn't about the tree, it was about what lay beneath it. She didn't want me playing near that place. She didn't want me digging. She didn't want me to find out what she and my grandfather had done. I think about that sometimes late at night. I think about all those winters I spent at her house, looking out at that tree, wondering why it felt so wrong. I think about how she must have looked at it every single day, knowing what was underneath, knowing that Julian was down there in the frozen ground. I've been driving snowplows for the Minnesota Department of Transportation for 11 years. It's not glamorous, but the pay is decent, and I don't mind working nights. Most people hate the isolation, the cold, and the endless stretches of highway with nothing but your headlights and the sound of the blades scraping asphalt. I actually prefer it, or at least I used to. This happened last February during one of the worst blizzards we'd had in years. It was the kind of storm where visibility drops to 0 and the snow comes down so fast your plow can barely keep up. I, Aleb Miller, was assigned Route 12, a 70-mile stretch of highway between Wilmar and Montevideo. It's mostly farmland and a few small towns. There's nothing much out there except darkness and cold. I started my shift at 10 p.m. The storm had already been raging for 3 hours, and the highway was buried under 8 inches of fresh powder. I radioed Janice at dispatch to confirm my route and headed out. The first hour was routine. I kept the plow down, maintained a steady 20 miles per hour, and watched the white line at the edge of the road. The snow was coming down heavy, but I'd driven through worse. Around midnight, I passed mile marker 47. There was a car on the shoulder, a dark sedan. It looked like a Honda or a Toyota, though it was hard to tell with the snow covering it. The hazard lights were on, blinking weakly through the whiteout. I slowed down and grabbed my radio. "Janice, this is Caleb in Unit 12. I've got a stranded vehicle at mile marker 47. It looks abandoned. Do you want me to call it into State Patrol? There was a pause, then Janice came back. Unit 12, we don't show any vehicles reported on your route tonight. It's probably someone who pulled over before the storm hit. We'll send a patrol unit when conditions improve. I acknowledged her and kept moving. It bothered me a little, leaving a car out there, but if it was abandoned, there wasn't much I could do. I continued plowing, making my way west. The snow was relentless. My wipers could barely keep the windshield clear, and the wind was strong enough to rock the truck every few minutes. Around 1 a.m., I reached mile marker 52. That's when I saw it again. The same car, the same dark sedan, the same weak hazard lights blinking through the snow. It was pulled over on the shoulder exactly like before. I hit the brakes, my truck sliding slightly before coming to a stop. I stared at the car through my windshield. This didn't make sense. I had just passed this car 5 miles back. There was no way it could have gotten ahead of me. The highway was one long, straight line, and I'd been plowing the entire time. Nobody could have driven past me without me seeing them. I grabbed my radio again. Janice, Unit 12. I'm at mile marker 52, and I'm seeing that same vehicle again. Same make, same position. This doesn't make sense. Another pause. Unit 12, you said mile marker 52? That's 5 miles from where you reported the first vehicle. It might be a different car. A lot of people get stuck in storms like this. I wanted to believe that, but something felt wrong. The car looked identical. Same positioning on the shoulder, same angle, and the hazard lights had the same slow, staggered rhythm. I got out of my truck. The cold hit me immediately, the wind cutting through my coat like I wasn't wearing anything at all. I approached the car slowly, my flashlight cutting through the falling snow. The windows were covered in a thick layer of ice. I couldn't see inside. I knocked on the driver's side window. No response. I tried the door handle. It was locked. I cleared some snow off the windshield with my glove and shined my flashlight inside. The car was empty. No one was in the driver's seat, and no one was in the back. But here's what made my stomach turn. The keys were in the ignition. The engine was off and the metal was completely cold, but those hazard lights were still blinking. I checked the hood. It was ice cold. This car hadn't been running recently, maybe not for hours. I radioed Janice again and reported what I found. She told me they'd send someone out when the roads were safer. I got back in my truck and continued plowing. I tried to focus on the road, on the white line, on anything except that car. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Around 2 a.m., I reached mile marker 58. The car was there again. Same spot, same shoulder, same hazard lights. I didn't stop this time. I just kept driving, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I didn't even radio it in. Janice would just tell me the storm was messing with my perception, but I knew what I was seeing. It was the same car. I pressed on, plowing through mile marker 60, then 65, then 70. Each time I thought I was clear of it, each time I convinced myself it was just my imagination, I'd round a slight curve or crest a small hill, and there it would be, always ahead of me, always on the shoulder, always with those slow, rhythmic hazard lights cutting through the snow. At mile marker 73, I stopped plowing. I pulled over, turned off my truck, and sat there in the darkness. The only sound was the wind hammering against the cab and the faint tick-tick-tick of my own hazard lights. I looked in my rearview mirror. The highway behind me was clear, just fresh snow and the tracks from my plow. I looked ahead. There, maybe 100 yards up the road, was the sedan. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30. Time felt strange. Eventually, I turned my truck back on and started driving toward it. I moved slowly, 5 miles per hour. The car got closer, 50 yards, 30, 20. I could see the hazard lights clearly now. 10 yards, 5. I was right next to it. I stopped and looked out my window. The car was there, driver's side facing me. I grabbed my flashlight and got out. The wind nearly knocked me over. I stumbled to the car and pressed my face against the glass. It was empty, just like before. I walked around to the passenger side. Empty. I checked the back seat. Nothing. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There were no tire tracks leading to the car. The snow around it was completely undisturbed except for my own footprints. No tracks on the shoulder, no tracks on the road. The car was just sitting there, as if it had been placed there by something that didn't need to drive. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the wind. I got back in my truck, put it in gear, and drove. I didn't look in my mirrors, I didn't look at the side of the road. I just kept my eyes forward and plowed until the sun came up. I finished my route around 5 a.m. When I got back to the yard, I filed a report. I gave the supervisor, Art Henderson, the mile markers and the description. Art looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but he said he'd send someone out to check. 2 days later, he called me into his office. They had driven the entire route twice. There was no car, no tire tracks, and no evidence that any vehicle had been on that shoulder. Art asked me if I'd been drinking or if I needed to take some time off. I told him I was fine, but I wasn't. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those hazard lights blinking through the snow. A week later, I requested a route change. They moved me to Route 7, a different stretch of highway on the other side of the county. I haven't been back to Route 12 since. 6 months later, I ran into another plow driver at a rest stop, an older guy named Hank Old Man Rivers. He'd been doing this for 20 years. We got to talking about difficult routes, and I mentioned Route 12. His face changed. He got quiet for a second, then asked me if I'd ever seen anything strange out there. I told him about the car. Hank nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting it. He told me he used to drive Route 12 back in the 90s and saw the exact same thing, always staying ahead of him, no matter how fast he drove. He reported it, and nobody believed him either. He said 3 other drivers had seen it over the years. One of them quit after a single shift. Another transferred to day routes. The third one, Hank said, leaning in, was a guy named Leo Vance. He kept driving Route 12 for 2 more winters. Said he got used to it. Then one night, he didn't come back to the yard. They found his plow the next morning, abandoned at mile marker 47. Engine running, lights on, door wide open. Leo was gone. They searched for weeks but never found him. Hank looked at me with an expression I'll never forget, half warning, half relief. Whatever's out there on Route 12, it wants something. And one of these nights, it's going to get it. I thanked him for the coffee and left. But sometimes late at night when the snow is coming down heavy and visibility drops to nothing, I see headlights in my rearview mirror. They don't move. They just sit there. And when I look again, they're gone. I tell myself it's another plow or a stranded driver. I tell myself it's just my mind playing tricks. But I know what I saw that night, and I know it's still out there waiting on the shoulder of Route 12, hazard lights blinking through the snow. It's waiting for the next driver to notice it, waiting for someone to stop. And I wonder about Leo Vance. I wonder if he stopped. I wonder if he got out of his truck and walked toward that car one too many times. I wonder if that's what it wants, for someone to finally open the door. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and nothing ever really changes. For 15 years, from the time I started working at the post office until the year I moved away, I drove the same route to work every morning. It took me down County Road 9, a 2-lane road that cut through farmland and woods. During the winter, that road was brutal. Snow would pile up on the shoulders and the wind would blow drifts across the asphalt. But I knew it well, and I was careful. About 3 miles from town, there was a bus stop, just a wooden bench and a faded sign marking the spot for Route 22. I passed it every morning at 6:45 a.m., like clockwork, and every winter morning for as long as I could remember. There was a woman standing there. She was maybe in her 50s, of average height, always wearing the same long brown coat and a knit hat. She would be standing on the shoulder, waiting, with her hands in her pockets. Every single morning I'd drive by, and she would wave. Not a big wave, just a small, polite gesture. I'd nod back and keep driving. It became a routine part of my morning. I never thought much about it. This went on for years. Every winter she would be there. Same spot, same time, same coat. I assumed she worked somewhere in town and took the bus in. Lots of people did. The bus was cheaper than driving, especially in winter when gas prices went up and road conditions made commuting dangerous. But I never actually saw her board a bus. I never even saw a bus stopped at that spot. I just saw her standing there, waiting. One morning, maybe 7 or 8 years into this routine, I passed the bus stop and she wasn't there. It threw me off more than it should have. I actually slowed down, looking for her, wondering if she was running late or if she'd taken a different route. But the stop was empty, just the bench, the sign, and the snow. I felt oddly unsettled for the rest of the day. The next morning she was back. Same spot, same wave. I felt relieved, which was ridiculous. Why should I care if some stranger was at a bus stop? But I did. She had become part of my routine, part of the landscape, a constant in a world that was always changing. It wasn't until I was 43, almost 15 years after I'd first started seeing her, that I learned the truth. I was having coffee at the diner in town with a coworker, and I mentioned the woman at the bus stop. Just casual conversation. I said something like, "You ever notice that woman on County Road 9 who's always waiting for the bus? She's been there for years." My coworker looked at me funny. "What woman?" I described her. The brown coat, the knit hat, the polite wave. My coworker shook his head. "There's no bus route on County Road 9. Hasn't been for decades. Route 22 was discontinued back in the 80s after that accident." I stared at him. "What accident?" He set his coffee down and leaned back in his chair. "You really don't know? It was a big deal at the time. Winter of '84, I think. A bus skidded on black ice and went off the road, crashed into a tree. The driver didn't make it. There was a passenger too, a woman. She didn't survive either. After that, they shut down the route, said it wasn't safe." I felt cold, not from the diner's air conditioning, but from something deeper. "Where did it happen?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "County Road 9, about 3 miles out of town, right near that old wooden bench." I didn't finish my coffee. I left the diner and drove straight to the bus stop. It was midday, bright and cold, the kind of winter afternoon where everything looks sharp and clear. I parked on the shoulder and got out. The bench was there, weathered and old. The sign was still up, faded and rusted. Route 22. I walked around the area looking for something, anything that would make sense. That's when I saw the small memorial. It was set back from the road, half buried in snow, a wooden cross with a name carved into it. Margaret Holloway, 1936 to 1984. Below the name, someone had written, "Still waiting." I stood there for a long time, staring at that cross. Margaret Holloway, the woman I'd been seeing every winter morning for 15 years. The woman who waved at me. The woman who never aged, never changed, and never got on a bus. I drove home in a daze. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her, about how she'd been there every single winter morning, standing at that bus stop, waiting. The next morning I drove my usual route. I told myself she wouldn't be there. I told myself it had all been in my head, some kind of shared hallucination or false memory. But when I reached the bus stop at 6:45 a.m., she was there. Same spot, same coat, same knit hat. She waved at me. I slowed down, my hands gripping the wheel. I stared at her as I passed. She looked solid, real, not like a ghost or a vision, just a woman waiting for a bus. I kept driving. I didn't wave back. For the next 2 weeks, I took a different route to work. It added 20 minutes to my commute, but I couldn't bring myself to drive past that bus stop again. I couldn't look at her, knowing what I knew, but eventually I had to go back. The other route was too long and too inconvenient. So one morning I drove County Road 9 again. I reached the bus stop at 6:45. She was there. She waved. This time I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to confront it. Maybe I needed to know if she was real. I pulled over onto the shoulder and rolled down my window. She walked toward my car slowly, deliberately. She stopped a few feet away and looked at me. Up close, I could see her face clearly. She looked tired, not old, just tired, like she'd been waiting for a very long time. "Can I help you?" I asked. My voice sounded strange and hollow. She smiled, a sad, small smile. "The bus is late," she said. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "It's always late." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there staring at her. She looked down the road toward town like she was expecting something. "How long have you been waiting?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She just kept looking down the road. Finally, she said, "A long time, but it'll come eventually. It always does." I wanted to tell her the bus wasn't coming, that it had been discontinued 40 years ago, that she needed to stop waiting, but I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat. She looked back at me, then really looked at me. And for just a second, I saw something in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or sadness. "You've been kind," she said quietly, "waving back all these years. Not many people do that anymore." My chest tightened. "How many people see you?" I asked. She thought about it. "Not many, fewer each year. But I'm still here, still waiting." I just nodded and rolled up my window. I drove away, watching her in my rearview mirror. She stood there, hands in her pockets, watching me leave. Then she turned back toward the road, waiting. That image stayed with me. I couldn't shake it. A week later, I drove past the bus stop again. It was earlier this time, around 6:15 a.m., before I usually saw her. I wanted to see if she was there all the time, or just when I passed by. The stop was empty. No one was there, just the bench, the sign, and the snow. But at 6:45, when I drove back the same way, she was there. Same spot, same wave. It was like she appeared just for me, or maybe just for anyone who still remembered to look. I moved out of state 6 months later. I took a job in Pennsylvania and left that town behind. I never drove County Road 9 again, but sometimes on winter mornings when I'm driving to work and I pass a bus stop, I slow down just for a second, just to check. And I wonder if she's still there, standing on the shoulder of County Road 9, waiting for a bus that will never come, still waving at strangers, still trapped in that moment. I wonder if she knows. I wonder if she'll ever stop waiting. And I think about what she said, that fewer people see her each year. I wonder what happens when no one sees her anymore. When the last person who remembers her stops driving that road. When the last person who waves back is gone. Does she fade away? Or does she just keep standing there, invisible and alone, waiting for a bus that crashed 40 years ago? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to know. But every winter, when the first snow falls, I think about her. And I hope someone still drives past that bus stop at 6:45 a.m. I hope someone still sees her, because the thought of her standing there unseen and forgotten, waiting forever in the cold, is worse than any ghost story I've ever heard.